boldest to get through that. But, it's amazing. And if I can I'll try to give a super brief testimony, but I grew up going to church. I gave my life to the Lord when I was 5 years old. I remember it so clearly. I remember the house. I remember the room. I remember going to my dad and said, Dad, I want to give my life to Jesus. I remember it so clear. And I remember from that point, I can honestly say that the Lord set me apart. Because all through my school, I went to a Christian school, but there was a separation between myself and the other kids. And naturally, I went to church. I got involved in young adults, youth groups, worship team, everything. And I went to Bible school, and I was like, what on earth is wrong with the church? It was just absolute chaos, absolute hypocrisy, and I just struggled with it. And during that time, I was at Bible college. The Lord, I'll spare all the details. The Lord's details are, it's incredible. Like if I had time, I would share. But down to minutes, literal minutes and seconds that I made these connections. And that was in 2005, I think it was February 2nd. And I remember I met this guy, and he was from Botswana. Didn't even know where that was. Like many of us probably still don't know where that is. And I knew that I was going there. I knew it. And I remember being on this bus from Vancouver back to a town called Abbotsford in British Columbia. And I remember the Lord spoke so clearly to me, and he said, you will go, and you're not going to go and serve. You're not going to go and bring somebody. I'm sending you to bring something back. That was 16 years ago. And yeah. And so I went, as Keegan said, I went to Botswana. I was there as a volunteer missionary. And again, I went there to run away from the church in Canada, to run away from the chaos, to run away from all the nonsense that so many Christians have been hurt by. And I was one of them. And in that time, I got there and I was getting involved, and I was a doer. I did a lot of stuff. And while I was there, I did 1 year, went back to Canada, did a bunch of fundraising, worked, went back to Botswana, and while I was there again, the more I got involved, guess what? It's all the same. All the same problems, the pride, the egos, and me too, eh? I'm not pointing fingers at the other guys, probably me first of all. And in that time, I realized that I wasn't changing, and that was probably the biggest thing. And so that was 2006, 2007, 2008. And in this time, the Lord started to break me. And he brought me to this place where I had given up my life in Canada. I'd sold all my stuff. I had literally moved to Botswana. I bought a car, was renting a house, had furniture, everything there. And within 7 months, it was like, I got to get out of here. Everything I came here to do just fell apart around me. Everything was falling apart. And I remember I started going to the church there, and I'd met Brian, and I don't know if everybody knows Brian Watts, but love the guy. He's such a father to me. Just take care. And in that time, I remember walking into church the one morning where I was so finished. And I was just like, the only option was to just hit eject and go back to Canada. I was just going to the church. I didn't have a vision. I was just going there, and I was sitting there, and my heart was so hard, I just criticized what I heard. I sat there and I heard it, but I still, he used that verse out of context, or I didn't really like what he said, it kind of makes me, I don't agree with that, I hadn't the knowledge, so I could debate it, And in this time, I remember that Sunday, I showed up, and I had shared with Brian, and God gave that man, I tell you, beyond sainthood, because he put up with me. Where's Rox? He put up with us, eh? Rox knows. Before Rox met me, I was even worse than I was when he met me. And I remember walking in that Sunday, and Brian, you could see it on my face. I was an absolute mess. And Brian just came up to me, and he said, so look, how's it going? And I said, it's not good. I said, I'm going back to Canada. And he looked at me, and he said, Luke, you can't go back. And I was like, huh? He said, there's no church there. I was finished. Because he was right. And it was so clear. I'm like, I can't go back. There's no church. If I go back, when am I going back? I'm going to be completely alone, completely gone. And it was right before that conference that Keegan's mentioning in Durban, 2008. And it's amazing because the Lord's timing, again, perfect. He finished me, and I was in this place right before that conference. And I went to that conference, and I heard the gospel being preached for the first time. And it was so refreshing. I remember that first meeting, and Mickey started saying, talking about the state of the church. And nobody wanted to talk about the state of the church. And I thought I was the crazy one because You know, am I only one that sees the disunity, the chaos, the this, the that, the fact that I'm not changing, you know? And in that time, we had that first meeting. It was like, wow, this guy's actually real. And then the second night, what was shared was about being a son in the gospel. And I was done, because I was on my own mission. I was completely on my own mission. I was trying to be a missionary. I was trying to serve the Lord. And I was sharing with Rod the other day, and I was telling him, you know, in that time, and I think so many of us Christians do it, we grade ourselves as Christians by what we've done. And the Lord gave me this image of a concrete foundation, just a slab. And the Lord said, this is you're trying to build a temple of worship to me, but you're using every brick as something you've done. You've a brick of, oh, I led worship here, I shared at that camp, I led that guy to Jesus, I did this, me. And the Lord said, it was like in this picture, it's like these just partial walls and the bricks are all crooked and nonsense. And the Lord just, his hand, whoof, flattened it, wiped it clean. He said, I want to build. And in that time, the Lord began to restore me. And I remember that it was a 3-day conference. So the first day was like, wow, this is amazing. The second day was like, God, just take my life now. I was so done. I remember going home after that meeting, and honestly, that was my prayer. I was like, Lord, you either change me or don't let me wake up in the morning, because I don't want to deal with this, you know? But it was. I can honestly say I prayed that earnestly. Lord, just finish me now. And it was amazing. In his grace, I'm still here, you know? And that next day, I'll sum it up anyway. I talked to the guys, and it was just clear, go to Mauritius. So I went to Mauritius. I spent time with the team there, as Keegan said. Then I went back to Botswana. I was with the church there. Still full of my nonsense, still full of everything. Like I say, Brian is a saint, man. Brian and Martine and the team that put up with me. I always joke, like, God put me there just to test the church, you know? But even Rox and I were talking the other day. He's like, yeah, man, you were terrible. But it's true, because I was so full of pride. And so my whole life, I had hip problems. I was born with hip dysplasia. I had reconstructive surgery when I was 12. It was just a matter of time till I needed full replacements. And again, the Lord's timing is impeccable, because in this time, I was so caught up in my involvement in the church. I was still that doer. That character that Peter talked about the first night needed to be dealt with. And in that, the Lord used my hip problems. And all of a sudden, it was December 2011. I remember so clearly, I just photographed a wedding, and the rains came that night. And so I went from dry season to wet season. And in Africa, it's like desert, hot and steamy, you know? And I couldn't walk for almost 2 weeks. I was in so much pain. I was in so much suffering. I just couldn't function for 2 whole weeks. And I remember saying to Brian, I got to go and get my hips done. And Brian, again, such a support. And he said, yeah, go. So I went to Canada thinking I'd go get a hip done, come back to Botswana, go back get the other one done, go back to Botswana and continue my life there. But I went back to Canada, and I had the first one done, and things got worse. I had more pain, more problems, you know, and it just went downhill. So, Kate, nope, not going back to Botswana. That was a year. And then the second year, okay, well, the doctors were like, well, you need the second one done anyway. Let's get the second one done, and then maybe you'll be fine. So I had the second hip done, and it got even worse. And so I had given up my life in Botswana. I had given up being with the church. I had gone to Canada to get fixed so I could go back and do more stuff, you know. And in that time, I remember it got to the point where I couldn't make a sandwich and then eat it. I would get in the kitchen and I'd make a sandwich. By the time I was finished making a sandwich, I'd be in so much pain, I'd have to lay on the floor, pop a morphine pill, wait for about half an hour, and then I could sit up and eat the sandwich. So I was in that point. And I remember being there, and I was so angry with God. I remember one day just being, Lord, why? Why are you doing this, Lord? I'm here in Smithers. I'm by myself. There's nothing happening here. We kind of tried to start something with some people. Nothing was happening. I was completely alone. And I remember being so angry as, God, what are you doing? Like, this doesn't make sense. And the Lord spoke so clearly, and he rebuked me, and he said, you are here because this is where I have you. That was 2 years into 4 years, eh? Shortly after that, God in his grace began to lead me to figure out my health problems. But in that time, in that time, again, Brian Watts was such a key for me, and these relationships that we have. And it wasn't deep things. I remember I didn't know. It was before WhatsApp. We were barely using Skype, and we had a 9-10 hour time zone difference. So like it was hard to talk to anybody. But I would just shoot Brian a message. I'd be like, Brian, it sucks. Like, I don't know what to say. I'm in pain. Like, what do you say? I'm absolutely miserable, And Brian would just email me back, I'm praying for you, But it's that keeps us, when we're real with where we're at. I think so many Christians, and myself included, we've been that point where we know we should be this far down the road, and we try to act that like we're that far down the road, and we try to be like we're this far down the road, but the reality is I'm standing here. We go, yeah, everybody, right? How many of us? I mean, that's it. I know I'm supposed to be down there. The reality is I'm actually probably back there somewhere, But God in his grace, he keeps us. And honestly, it was him that kept me. When he said that to me, that you are here because I have you, in absolute misery, physical, lonely, everything, it was just like, it didn't make it easier, but somewhere it gave me a peace to face it, Knowing that I was in the plan of the Lord was all that mattered. And I think there's many people here that just need to know they're in the plan of the Lord. Because despite the storm you're in, you can have peace in that, And so, just to bring it up to where we are today, so I was there. As the Lord, he allowed me to find help to heal me. That's, again, more stories. Amazing. I got off painkillers. I'm 100%. And then I was able to come visit the church here, and it was so special. I remember that first trip down here. Oh, Matt Sullivan was the only guy here that knew me at the time. And it was like, oh, Luke's coming. And people were like, who's Luke? That's great. And I remember that. And it was so special to be here. Thanks, Matt, for helping with that. And, but throughout it, there were these relationships that helped keep me too, And so anyway, I was able to come here, and then over time, the Lord showed me that Twyla, some of you know Twyla was to be my wife, and we got married. That's a whole nother testimony of the Lord's faithfulness. We hadn't seen each other for over 4 years, And the Lord spoke to me, and he spoke to her, and he said, you guys, I'm putting you together, okay? And it was his plan, and we rejoice. So another 2 months, we'll be married 6 years already. It's crazy. We got a little one on the way. And, even when we got married, the Lord made it very clear that his plan was for us to get to Canada and to serve there and trust him for something there. And, of course, when we have that word from the Lord, we want to go. I want to go now. And we tried to go, and the Lord shut us down. And we went through more stuff. And Brenda and Neil were there, took care of us. The Lord used them. Such a miracle. I mean, so many testimonies. Who was I talking to the other day? I said, it's like you can write books and books. Like Jordan and Michaela were talking, And so long story short, we're there. We're there in Smithers. We've been there for just over 2 years now. We moved in the middle of COVID. Pete and Jane, the Lord used you guys to help us see when to go. I was so discombobulated because we were trying to go, COVID happened, lockdown, and that was like months were going by, and I was like, I don't know, is the Lord telling me to stay here or go there? And I remember sitting down for coffee, and Peter's just like, what are you doing here still? So, okay, perfect. But these relationships, they keep us. These relationships, they point us to the Lord. They help hold us back when we need to be held back. 'Cause sometimes, like I say, we want to go do it. But I need that. I need to know, hey, Luke, just wait, And even us being in Canada now, like I say, we have a small group starting, but it's Rod, it's Keegan, it's the team. We're working with a team. We're never alone, okay? But in that, also with the team is the gospel we hear. And that message we hear to lose our lives is the only thing that will keep you. It's the only thing that gives you the ability to have a relationship with each other. Without that message, forget it. You're going to go far. You're not going to have relationships. Your relationships are superficial. But when the message, when our relationships are built on that foundation, that it's my life for Jesus and my life for the church, and then it becomes our lives for each other, then we can go somewhere. Even last night, I was on the phone with my wife, and I said, it's funny, because I come down here, and sometimes when you come at camp, you expect to just come in, and then the Lord just breaks you, and here we go, just tears and snot flying all weekend, And Twyla said something so profound to me yesterday. She said, you know, Luke, I didn't expect that because the Lord deals with us every day. And I thought, that's true. That's very true. And I tell you, we've been by ourselves there for 2 and a bit years. But as I've said to many of you guys, it's like we've been in an incubator. The Lord's just, the gospel's still at work. The gospel's still working in us because we're clinging to that. We're clinging to the relationships. We're clinging to that gospel. And we've never really felt lonely. Honestly, we've never felt lonely. And we're beginning to see fruit. And there's other people in Smithers, the Bashers and Rick and Pat. They're encouraged. They've been encouraged. And it's so precious to see these families also encouraged. And we're beginning to see that gospel, it's so beyond me. It's so beyond you. But it's the power of God to change lives. And we're so excited for what the Lord's doing up there. And it's just so special, guys. It really is. So be encouraged, but keep that foundation. Keep the relationships. Don't pretend to be down there when you're here. If you need to call somebody up and just say, hey, look, I'm discouraged. I'm depressed. I'm a mess. Don't try to pretend. Let the Lord do a work. But we go forward. It's awesome. Anyway. See you in Canada. The border's open now.